I saw people were running towards our community center because they don't have anywhere else to go, but then getting taken by wave. I saw houses that were like flying. It seems like they were just papers. And at that point, I honestly thought it was the end of us, you know? That experience really, it was an enlightenment for me because a Super Typhoon Haiyan made me realize that what happened to us wasn't just a natural disaster. It was the result of global injustice.
Hi, welcome to 𝐂𝒂𝒓𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒍, the podcast about inequality. I'm 𝐂�𝐲𝒃𝒂𝒕.
Welcome to 𝐂𝒂𝒓𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒍. This is enough.
So, how is it going now?
Oh, grazie. I'm really busy with COP stuff. And right now, I'm working from London, but will be in Belém, or I'm hoping to be in Belém over the weekend to attend the second week of COP. But I was wondering, actually, Grazie, what's the vibe like in Brazil?
Well, first, welcome to the country, and the whole country is so focused on Belém right now. Many country representatives here trying to find an agreement, sometimes moving forward, sometimes moving backward, but we see there is an attempt. And what's your feeling? Do you think we will solve climate crisis at this COP?
Oh, I wish I could be positive about that. But given the geopolitical tension, around the world, I expect, this will spill into the climate negotiations, and it will really be difficult to advance on a lot of key issues, from reducing emissions to addressing the finance gap, especially for adaptation. And also, the power imbalance between the global north and global south will definitely have an impact on COP outcomes. But I want to be positive. There is a lot of activism happening on the ground, especially with grassroots and civil society organizations putting pressure on governments. So this really gives me hope. And, I believe at the end of the day, or ultimately, for things to change, the public has to push for them.
I totally agree. And the good news is that in our episode today, just like in the last one, we will be telling an uplifting story of a youth climate activist who organized the first climate strike in her country. She also advocates for a ban on single-use plastics, the reduction of carbon emissions, and investments in renewable energy.
I'm really excited about that, Grazie. We will be talking to Marinel Ubaldo. She's a youth climate activist from the Philippines.
And it's such a great interview that will give hope and inspire many around the world. So let's listen.
Yes, please, let's dive in.
Let's start with your story. Marinel, you have been speaking out for climate justice ever since the Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines in 2013, right? Can you tell us what that moment was like for you? How did you feel? How did you live that? And what inspired you to take action?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me in this podcast. I appreciate the invitation to be here and the opportunity to be able to tell my story. So it was Super Typhoon Haiyan, one of the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history, that made landfall in our province in 2013. It was November 8th. It's 12 years since Super Typhoon Haiyan. And during that day in 2013, I was like 16 years old. And as a youth leader in our community, I founded this youth organization, and we were able to help the village council to identify what kind of infrastructure that we have in the community for the people to evacuate to, because we didn't have any formal evacuation center. So we were using old school rooms as an evacuation for people. And I remember my father putting a lot of our things on a rope. Even our house was roping it to make sure that even if it will be washed out, our belongings would still be in one place. The Philippines experiences an average of 21 typhoons per year. And half of that usually pass by our community. Because we are at the end of a peninsula in a coastal village facing the Pacific Ocean. So we are on the path of the typhoon. So growing up, I've been really used to typhoons. I've been really used to going to concrete houses and then going back to our house, and our house will be there after the typhoon. So I told my father, we don't need to go to the evacuation center. And we don't, quite honestly, there was no space for us anymore in any of the evacuation centers. And my father was like, yeah, but your daycare center is still available, so we will go there. My father was very persistent, so I went to the evacuation center with my family with only a shoulder bag, and it consists of an encyclopedia, a notebook, a pen, and a phone and a charger. Because in my head, I was like, well, we will just go home after the typhoon, just like what we always do, right? But it was at night, the night before Haiyan made landfall, there was no electricity anymore. And it really started around 3 in the morning when we hear this howling wind that was seemingly like coming from the core of the earth. I woke up hearing the scream and the cry of the people that we were with at the community center or at the daycare center. My father made sure that we were kind of far away from the window because the window was a glass window and it was already breaking, and some of the people in that room were already hurt because of the debris and because of the glass windows. And you could really hear the screaming even from people that were on the other evacuation centers. That night, I saw people were running towards our community center because they don't have anywhere else to go, but then getting taken by wave. I saw houses that were like flying. It seems like they were just papers. And at that point, I honestly thought it was the end of us, you know? And then there was an earthquake that happened as well in the middle of the storm surge, in the middle of the strong winds, in the middle of uncertainty. There was another tsunami. So my family was telling us that we need to go to the mountains to save ourselves because we don't know if there would be a tsunami on top of the storm surge that was happening. But it wasn't also safe to even go out. So we stayed. And that's when my cousin told us that our house was gone. And at that point, I couldn't really believe it. I was like, but that house was so strong. That house has survived so many typhoons. And all I could think of was like this box that I had with all the things that are sentimental for me. And also my cat. We weren't able to bring our cat to the evacuation center. So he stayed in our house. So like around 6 in the morning, I didn't tell anyone in my family. I just run back to our house. I saw the trees that have fallen down. Like it was really not safe but for anyone to go out because the trees were still very much falling down at that time at 6 in the morning. But I really wanted to see our house. I just couldn't believe that it will be washed out. And true enough, when I got there, there were just 3 pillars of the home that were left. But you know what gave me hope? When I was rushing to our house, my cat was running, whining, crying towards me. And that really gave me hope. I saw that everything that we have worked for is not there anymore. But it seems like at that time there was something to live for. That experience really, it was an enlightenment for me because after a month, we faced another typhoon. So all the makeshift houses that we have built that have just been washed away again. And I thought to myself, I don't want to live just surviving every other typhoon. I just refuse to believe that would be our new normal. So that's when we started lobbying with our government because as much as we're not immune to typhoon, but we're so used to facing typhoons, we could have already a proactive measures to make sure that whenever there are typhoons, tragedies like this, there will be not much casualties or there will be no casualties at all because we know already how to face tragedies like this. I realized, like the Philippines is contributing less to the carbon emission, but even though we contribute the least to this crisis, we were paying the highest price. And that Super Typhoon Haiyan made me realize that what happened to us wasn't just a natural disaster. It was the result of global injustice. And that really was the reason that we started acting.
I just would like to thank you for opening your heart and sharing with us your story and going back there, because I know this can be hard and emotional. So I really appreciate the way you took us back to your history with all the emotions and the difficulties you've lived. Somehow I'm living in a small, very small proportion while you lived by some time losing your home. And I can understand this feeling of seeing the anchor gone and you're just sailing and you don't know where you're going and what's going to happen, the unsafety that we have. So in a small proportion, I can imagine the feeling. You are a very, very strong woman and activist. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I want to echo what 𝒂𝒓𝒊𝒏𝒆𝒍 said, because Marinel, honestly, what a horrific and at the same time heartbreaking experience. I'm really sorry that, your family and your community went through this. And it's also an important story to tell, especially because I feel like we're becoming so desensitized to news about disasters, no? And people don't often stop and think about the long-term, continuous struggle. I feel like the way you told the story, the minutes, hours, months, years of hardship that people like you have to endure. So again, thank you so much for sharing the story with us. I think you have already touched upon it, but it would be great if you can tell us, what shaped your journey? What were some of the early challenges you faced as a young climate activist? Was there a moment when you realized this fight was going to be your life's work?
As you know, the Philippines is one of the front line of every other disaster. I felt like at that point, we didn't really have a choice but to fight for the future that we wanted. Because if we will just sit back and just wait for yet another disaster, I feel like we have already given up on our future. And that is not something that I want. That is not the legacy that I want to leave to my children. I want to show to my future children that I have fought for the future that they all deserve. I definitely don't think that what we are experiencing right now is the kind of future that I want my children to experience. So it's been more than a decade since we started really fighting for climate justice. Yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, but you know what? I have already come to accept that I might not even see the result of the things that I'm doing in this lifetime. Maybe my children or my grandchildren will see the result of the things that we have worked on in the now. I know it takes a while to get progress. It takes many years to get the result of the actions that we are doing now. But little by little, if I am seeing that we have been changing minds of the people about climate change and about how we can act, I think that's already a result for me. And in terms of systemic change, that might not happen in my lifetime, but I hope that it will happen in the lifetime of my children and grandchildren.
Well, I really hope that we do see changes, maybe starting ours, but at least at our children's and grandchildren's times, that we really see changes. And so let's fast forward to today, 𝐂𝐏30, that it's about to happen in a few days after we record this. It's been over a decade since Paris Agreement, and we are still seeing rising emissions and deepening inequality. How do you feel about the progress we have made since 2013? And what do you think needs to happen now to really accelerate change and maybe allow us to see in our lifetime some of these changes?
They said that 𝐂𝐏30 is a transformation cup. After having 2 cups in a petri state, it is a hope. But, we've been telling I was at COP in Dubai and I was at COP in Azerbaijan. And all the things that I've been hearing from people is that, don't worry, we just have to get through these 2 cups and then we'll go to Brazil and we will make it historic. So this cup has been something that people has been looking forward to after 2 cups in a petri state, right? And I'm really hoping that at COP30 and beyond, we need countries that will move from pledges to implementation. We have been seeing and hearing all those pledges from different countries, but they haven't really been materialized. And I just wish, like that those countries that have signed for the Paris Agreement, that if they're not abiding to what they have signed for, that they have some sort of repercussions for that. And I hate that there's nothing. I hate that there's no repercussions for the countries that have not been following their emission targets and that they are emitting more than what they have said. And I wish that 𝐂𝐏30 would be a COP where there is a rapid, a just, and an equitable phase out of fossil fuel. And, real investment in renewable energy that communities can access, because this is really something that in the Philippines we're struggling, especially because we have 7,000 islands and we need to decentralize our energy source. And I also wish that 𝐂𝐏30 would be a COP that will deliver on the promises on climate finance. I know that is one of the big topics right now at 𝐂𝐏30, especially for adaptation, especially for resilience and loss and damage and frontline nation. Because at the end of the day, I feel like climate justice must be at the center, of these conversations. Because this isn't just about cutting carbon. It's really about dismantling like a system of inequality that kept the global south vulnerable.
Thanks so much, Marinel. This is actually a question that I always ask myself. What needs to happen to make change happen? Because I feel like, especially this past summer or winter, whichever part of the world you were, and people experienced extreme weather events, from heat waves, let's say in the UK, in different parts of Europe, to flooding from Southeast Asia, to Horn of Africa. But still, when it comes to, making a dent in terms of achieving climate justice, we are really way behind. And I can tell communities care about this issue, but things are not moving. So I really loved how you broke things down in terms of, answering what needs to happen to accelerate change. So Marinel, you've been part of powerful movements in the Philippines. Can you tell us about the campaign to hold fossil fuel companies accountable through legal action? What was that experience like, and what impact has it had? And also, what advice would you give to young people who want to challenge, big polluters?
I just also want to comment on what you said earlier about like wherever you are in the world, you're being affected by the extreme weather events. And that really shows that wherever you are, you can be affected by climate change. That just because you are in a first world countries doesn't mean you are secured from feeling this effect, because climate change comes in so many different ways, right? I feel like a lot of people know that there is climate change, but like they think that, it's so far away from me. And sorry for my language, it's kind of crazy that we see disasters being live streamed in our own phone. But then this year and last year, we have been seeing it also in first world countries. So it's coming nearer to us. And it's a wake-up call that wherever you are you will be affected, and you are already being affected by the effects of climate change. But to go to your question, so I was one of the youth petitioners filed before Commission on Human Rights in the Philippines. So it was founded on Richard Hide's The Economist research that looked into the corporate responsibility on the emissions and on climate change. And he found that there are just around 100 companies that are responsible for around 70 to 72% of the carbon emission. And 47 of them exist in the Philippines. So we asked the Commission to investigate the 47 of the world's biggest fossil fuel companies that are in the Philippines for their role in causing climate-related human rights violations. It has taken us years before we were able to get the result of that. And we have journeyed with different people that sadly some of them had passed during the process. But you know what? After years of testimonies, after years of research and public hearings around the world, the Commission issued a landmark resolution that affirmed that carbon majors can be held liable for human rights harms resulting from climate change. And you know what made this case historic was that there was no Commission on Human Rights in the world that has ever accepted a petition like this or a litigation that was founded on human rights. So that was really the first time in the world. And it was so historic, but not just for the Philippines, but for, climate justice globally, because it established that climate change is a human rights issue and that people have the right to hold polluters accountable. I mean, who would have thought that a group of youth, a group of fishermen, a group of farmers, a group of community people will be coming together to put this petition against the giants, against these big polluters, right? And I think the lesson here is that, courageous communities or courageous actions from communities can really reshape systems. We may not have the money, or the power of corporations, but when we organize and when we are grounded in the truth and in our lived experience, we can create legal and moral and political precedents that shifts what's possible. After that petition that we have submitted, when we got already the result of that, it has been used as an evidence for other legal battles around the world on climate justice. So it really has set a starting point for a lot of communities around the world. And I guess my message to the youth who are thinking or have been already started getting into climate justice activism, I think what I always say is that follow your passion. There are so many things that you can do around climate justice, around climate change. There's so many different fields that you can be involved in. It doesn't just have to be climate justice. It can be water justice. It can be oceans justice. It can be gender justice. There's so many things that we all can do because this is all connected. All the issues that we are facing are all connected. And it's not easy. You will not see the result right now of the actions that we do, but little things that we do in our everyday life creates so much change, because just think about 8,000 people doing small little things in their everyday life. That's a lot. Maybe there's more to 8,000 of that. And that's when I told myself every time I get stress is not the right word, or maybe just when I feel like vulnerable, when I feel hopeless of our current political landscape right now, I always tell myself that aside from me, there are thousands of people doing little things as well in their daily life, and that makes me feel good.
Marinel, thank you. Actually, that's where I was willing to get with you, because it's amazing to hear how passionate and motivated you are. And those are really great advices. But when we also look to reality, we can see that the road feels very heavy right now, with many climate disasters, wars, rising inequalities, and authoritarianism. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and hopeless. So I would like to know, how do you stay hopeful and motivated in the face of all of this? What keeps you going?
That's a really good question. I always ask myself that every day too. And, it's really hard. It's really hard when, I see headlines about fossil fuel projects or wars destroying communities. It feels like the fight is endless. But then I remember my people, the survivors of Haiyan, who rebuild again and again with grace and courage. I think of the youth leaders I mentor in Southeast Asia who are finding their voice in spaces that used to exclude them. Whenever I'm asked about this question, I always think that hope for me is not passive. It's something we build together. So I stay motivated because I know that every small act, every story, every campaign, and every small policy shift here and there adds up to that collective power. And I'm hopeful because I've seen change happen. 10 years ago, young people from the global south were barely in the room. Today, we are shaping the agenda. And that gives me strength to keep going, because if we could, shift the narrative once, I feel like we can do it again. And we just have to have the courage to do it again.
Thank you so much, Marinel. This was honestly an incredible interview. Hearing your story, I really found it inspiring. One last question. It's almost like a bonus question. Hoping that we can achieve a fairer, better, a more equal world. what do you think the role of the youth activists can be in creating this world?
I feel like there's a lot of youth activists, and I can speak only for myself and from the people that I know. As a child, I haven't even thought about becoming climate activist or even going into environmental field, because I was like, yeah, I have other dreams. I have like these fancy dreams, but then, circumstances have led us to this, and I'm not regretting anything. But sometimes, you would feel like, oh, I just hope that I'm like doing other things, because like this is just an endless fight and people are like fighting with us. People are saying that we are just a climate hoax and it's not actually real. And the role of the youth is really to push the agenda forward, to really push for their agenda that would benefit the future generation and the generation of today, because the future of this world is the people that are living in it today. And I just hope that people would see and realize that when people are fighting for climate justice, we're not just fighting for ourselves, fighting for everyone. And so people will not be experiencing the kind of experience I've experienced during Super Typhoon Haiyan. I don't think people deserve that.
Really inspiring words. Thank you so much, Marinel. And just out of curiosity, since the plan was not to become a climate activist, but you had all these fancy dreams. Would you like to share the fancy dreams if we were living in a much better world, where we don't need to spend our whole life fighting for climate justice? What would you have been doing?
Well, my childhood dream was to become a teacher, which in some ways I'm doing right now as an environmental activist. And I thought about, like being an accountant as well. Sometimes when it gets really overwhelming and you feel like, you know what? I wish that I'm doing the brand theater now. But that's the reality, though, of being in this space. As a human being, it is natural that people feel hopeless. But you know what? The thing is, we're still here and we're still continuing the fight. And I think that's what's important.
Thank you so much, Marinel. We're really grateful that you made the time to join 𝐂𝐴𝒂𝒄𝒄. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really, really inspiring to hear you and so touching. Thank you for bringing all this hard time you had into motivation and hope. So have learned a lot from you and regained some motivation to fight for climate justice and inequality reduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Thank you for having me.
What a powerful episode. Really inspiring. What did you think, Na?
I also found it really inspiring, 𝐂𝒂𝒄𝒄. Really moving, actually. I think I mentioned this earlier, but hearing Marinel talk about her horrific experience of Typhoon Haiyan, especially in detail, made me realize that we need to hear these stories and understand, the terrible ordeal that people go through. Because 𝐂𝒂𝒄𝒄, my concern is, with warming going up, we're experiencing more extreme weather events, and these are getting more intense and more frequent. But the more we hear about it, the more we're becoming desensitized, instead of taking action. And for this, I think we really need to realize what people are going through, and that it might also happen to us. Imagine, Marinel's experience with Typhoon Haiyan. I'm sure for her and her communities, they're still picking up the pieces and putting them together after all these years, that is. So we need to realize this and take action, because the climate crisis is destroying people's lives and their future.
Yes, I hear enough. And I was thinking that the destruction for Marinel, her community, and the Philippines in general didn't stop with Haiyan. Just this week alone, 2 typhoons were recorded, with hundreds dead and millions evacuated. If I'm not mistaken, over 21 typhoons have been recorded in the Philippines this year alone. So this tells us that with climate change, things are getting worse. But what I find incredibly inspiring is that people like Marinel, who are at the front line of climate crisis, are taking the fight from local to global levels and galvanizing others into action. That said, I want to acknowledge, as Marinel said, it's not by choice. They are forced into activism because of circumstances.
Well put, 𝐂𝒂𝒄𝒄. I totally agree. They don't have a choice except to fight. And that's why I believe, we should all be behind them, stand in solidarity. and we should all be fighting for a better world for all.
Agreed. That's why I find it inspiring and hopeful. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. Please tune in across December for a month of interviews on the importance of public services and fighting privatization and making sure that public goods remain on the hands of the public and doesn't become a luxury.
Yes, and also please be on the lookout for our episode with Thomas Piketty on the call for a new intergovernmental panel on inequality.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please help us spread the word. Subscribe, share it, and join the conversation.
You can find us on X at @equalshope, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at equals.inc.
Thanks so much for listening.
Bye, until next time.